everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Welcome to Novels Wonderland, Konosuba Kazuma, How Did You Become the Demon King? Chapter 127 to 130, The Unspeakable Contract. The morning sun, like a clumsy comedian, always inopportunely tears open the curtain of night, casting light and trouble into Demon King's castle. As always, the restaurant was filled with the aroma of food and a certain lazy atmosphere. However, today, this languid mood was shattered without mercy by a sharp female voice that was extremely penetrating and filled with righteous anger. Kazuma. You bastard. You sadistic neet. A disgrace to the Devil King world. How could you? How could you actually do something like this? Aqua, the great goddess of water, stood in the center of the restaurant, one hand on his hip, the other pointing at Kazuma, who had just walked in, still sleepy and yawning. His blue eyes burned with a fierce rage that seemed capable of purifying all the filth in the world. In her other hand, she waved a crumpled rag that Dao had picked up from somewhere, as if it were her holy banner to punish evil. Her voice was sharp and shrill from excitement, instantly attracting the attention of everyone in the restaurant. Chris, who was dining elegantly, paused, a hint of helplessness flashing in his purple eyes. Megumin, taking small bites of his fried egg, looked up, his ruby-like eyes filled with the annoyance of "here we go again." Alice looked at Kazuma with concern, then at Aqua. Wiz was so startled that he almost dropped his spoon into the soup bowl, and quickly lowered his head. Yu still didn't dare to speak, afraid of offending anyone. Darkness had just returned from patrol, and was drinking water when he heard this. He choked a little, his azure eyes looked at Kazuma, then quickly looked away, his face inexplicably burning. Hilna and Mimi also looked over curiously. What's wrong with you now, Aqua? Kazuma picked at her ear, walked to the head of the table with an impatient look and sat down. Making such a racket so early in the morning, can't a person have a proper meal? Eat? You still have the nerve to eat. Aqua became even more agitated, rushed up to him, and almost poked his nose with a rag. I know everything. You beast. You actually kidnapped Claire. And even kept her overnight. Did you use some despicable means to threaten her? Or did you use your disgusting thieving skills to steal her something and force her to submit? You pervert who rapes women. You monster. She got more and more audacious as she spoke, spitting almost onto Kazuma's face. I used to think that even though you were a monster, at least you wouldn't actually lay a hand on your comrades or people you knew. But you were so lustful that you made a move on a female knight from an enemy country. And you even locked her up in a castle. You're more like the Devil King than the Demon King's army. No, you are the Devil King. An evil, lewd, super Devil King who should be blasted to smithereens by my holy light. Kazuma listened expressionlessly to Aqua's illogical and specious rant, then slowly picked up a piece of bread, spread jam on it, took a bite, chewed, swallowed, and only then looked up at her, speaking in a flat tone. Are you done talking? Aqua was taken aback by his overly calm reaction. Aura faltered slightly, but immediately straightened her back. I am done. What, are you feeling guilty? Can't refute me. I knew it. You. First, Kazuma interrupted her, holding up his index finger. Claire came in on her own, she wasn't captured by me. You can ask her how she got in, or check if there's anything on the sky wall that she's stepped on that needs repair. The repair cost will be deducted from your allowance. Aqua, does that thing even need repair? Second, Kazuma said, extending his middle finger, I didn't threaten her with any despicable means or stealing skills. We had a friendly, adult negotiation and reached a mutually acceptable agreement. She stayed voluntarily. Aqua. Voluntary. Third, Kazuma extended his ring finger, glancing at Darkness, whose face looked somewhat unnatural, and Chris, whose expression was subtle. I made a move on her. Forced her. Aqua, besides bubble wine and pudding, is this kind of yellow trash all you have in your head? Aqua took a step back in fright, but then looked at Kazuma suspiciously. Then, why did she stay? And with that look on her face. She was referring to the scene in the corridor where she had stopped Claire, who was clearly trying to avoid people, and questioned her about why she was there. Claire's face flushed instantly, her eyes darted around, she bit her lip, hesitated, and finally managed to stammer out, This is Lady Kazuma's arrangement. Before she hurriedly ran away. That expression, that reaction, it all looked like he'd been caught red-handed, or forced to do something shameful. What does it look like? Kazuma feigned ignorance. It's like you've bullied me, but I'm too scared to say anything. Aqua tried her best to describe it. Oh, that one. Kazuma nodded as if he suddenly understood, then gave a meaningful, standard, grotesque smile. That's part of our agreement. As for the specifics, that's a matter of personal privacy, and I can't disclose that. However, if you're so curious, Aqua, I don't mind having a deep discussion with you and drafting a similar agreement, guaranteed to make you show that kind of expression too. How about it? He deliberately dragged out the words in-depth communication, and that expression, his eyes sweeping over Aqua with ill intent. Get away from me. You monster. Aqua jumped back like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, crossing her arms and looking terrified. Who wants to make that kind of disgusting agreement with you? I'm not curious at all. Humph. She said that, but her gaze toward Kazuma became even more wary, as if he were some kind of walking plague. Seeing that Aqua had been successfully scared away, Kazuma looked away with satisfaction and continued to enjoy his breakfast. The other people in the restaurant had various expressions. Chris seemed thoughtful, Megumin pouted, feeling bored, Alice relented and Wiz and Yu continued to keep a low profile, and Darkness kept her head down, seemingly lost in thought, her ears slightly red. Sylphina and Mimi looked completely bewildered, not quite understanding what the adults were arguing about. However, Assistant Kun, Chris elegantly wiped his lips, his purple eyes looking at Kazuma, his tone gentle but with a hint of inquiry, Claire, young Mrs., after all, a knight of Belzerd, and she was left behind in that way. Is it really all right? Don't worry, Kazuma waved her hand, she wrote a letter, and had Wiz send it back using teleportation magic. The letter stated that she was concerned about Princess Alice and volunteered to stay behind to secretly protect her, and observe the situation, and would not be returning for the time being. Even if the old king were to become desperate, upon seeing the letter and considering that his daughter was here, he probably wouldn't immediately break off relations. Moreover, he smiled, a hint of calculation in his smile. Having a former high-ranking official here who is familiar with the inner workings of Belzerd, especially the royal palace and the Night Order, is not a bad thing for us, is it? Chris nodded knowingly and didn't ask any more questions. Breakfast ended in this slightly eerie atmosphere. No one mentioned Claire anymore, but everyone tacitly knew that Dao had gained another guest in the castle with a special identity who seemed to have some kind of secret agreement with the Devil King. During the day, Claire is almost never seen. She seemed to be deliberately avoiding everyone, especially Kazuma. They only appear during lunch and dinner, but they just sit quietly in a corner, quickly finish their meal, and leave immediately, keeping their heads down the whole time, and almost never making eye contact with anyone. When someone tried to strike up a conversation, she only gave vague answers, her blush never fading. Even Megumin and Darkness, who trusted Kazuma the most, began to wonder if Kazuma had done something unspeakable to Claire that night. It was late at night. Most of the castle fell into a deep, slumbering silence as everyone returned to their rooms to rest. Only the magic wall lamps emitted a dim, yellowish light, illuminating the empty, cold corridor. On the first floor of the castle, in a secluded corner near the kitchen and laundry room, there is a small cubicle that is usually used to store miscellaneous items waiting to be washed. At this moment, a dim, solitary lamp is lit inside. Under the lamplight, Clairfield Symphonia, the former royal knight of Belzerd, the princess's personal bodyguard and education officer, rolled up her sleeves, revealing her fair but muscular arms, and squatted in front of a huge wooden basin that emitted a faint scent of soapberry. The wooden tub was piled high with socks, like a small mountain. White, black, dark blue, striped, holy, stained with suspicious dirt, all sorts of socks, like a soft, elastic little mountain exuding a subtle, bouncy scent, almost submerging her calves. Claire gritted her teeth, her emerald eyes fixed on the socks in the basin, as if they weren't socks, but the incarnation of some depraved devil king. She was holding a stiff bristled brush and was scrubbing one of the dark blue socks, which had an inconspicuous patch at the ankle, fiercely and forcefully. Bastard, idiot, moron. Scum, beast, neet. As she scrubbed vigorously, she uttered low, resentful curses through gritted teeth, the sound echoing in the quiet cubicle. They actually threatened me with that kind of thing, forced me to sign that humiliating agreement. Wash socks for a whole month. And all the socks in the castle. And they must be hand-washed. No magic allowed. No one else allowed to do it. And what's with all this talk about? This is to help you better integrate into castle life, experience the hardships of grassroots work, and cultivate patience and service spirit. It's clearly revenge. It's humiliation. When have I, Clairfield Symphonia, ever done anything like this? In Belzerg in the palace, all I had to do was practice swordsmanship, handle official duties, and protect Princess Your Highness. Wash socks. For that depraved devil king. Are you kidding me? She got more and more excited as she talked, and the brush in her hand almost rubbed a hole through the sock. And darknesses. Chris's. Megumans. Alice's. Your Highnesses. Sylphina's. Looking at the mountain of socks in the basin, belonging to all sorts of people from the castle, Claire felt a deep sense of powerlessness and absurdity. Is this one of the prices she paid for voluntarily staying behind in order to secretly protect Princess Your Highness? No, this is clearly the Devil King's punishment for her misunderstanding, kicking the door, and raising the sword last night. Using this seemingly insignificant method, which is actually full of humiliation and torture. She couldn't refuse yet. Because the agreement clearly states in black and white that if she refuses to fulfill her obligations under the agreement, the other party has the right to take measures including, but not limited to disclosing certain information, restricting her activities, or even repatriation. To disclose certain information. Claire felt dizzy thinking about Kazuma's despicable face during last night's negotiations, where he embellished his embarrassing story of sneaking in late at night, misunderstanding that the siblings were playing cards, and even trying to kill her, and spread it all over the continent. It was worse than death for her. Therefore, she had no choice but to endure it. Enduring shame and anger in the dead of night, hiding in this corner, I wash this pile of damn socks that reek of all sorts of stench, like the lowest of maids. Sato Kazuma, you just wait. Claire wrung out the clean socks and threw them into the basin of water next to her, splashing water everywhere. She bit her lip, her emerald eyes flashing with humiliation and resentment, but deep down, there seemed to be a trace of complex emotion that she herself did not realize, towards the man who could always come up with all sorts of crazy ideas and had her completely under his thumb. Once Princess Your Highness is safe, once I find my chance, I'll make you pay. She swore angrily, then resignedly pulled another one from the mountain of socks. This one was Megumin's, with a tiny explosion magic array crookedly embroidered on it. Even the socks are so weird. Claire sighed speechlessly and resignedly began to scrub them. Under the dim light, the blonde female knight squatted in front of a wooden tub, fighting with a pile of socks. The splashing water and whispered curses created a strange yet slightly poignant scene in the castle late at night. Meanwhile, in a luxurious bedroom on the upper level of the castle, Sato Kazuma lay sprawled on the soft bed, fast asleep, a suspicious drool still clinging to the corner of his mouth, as if dreaming of something wonderful. He was completely unaware of Tao and utterly indifferent to the fact that downstairs, a noble female knight was wrestling with her socks all night because of his perverted agreement. To him, this was merely a minor punishment for a trivial matter, a small way to ensure the trouble would temporarily subside, and to provide the castle with a little free labor. As for Claire's shame, anger, and curses. Anyway, he's sleeping like a log and can't hear anything at all. Chapter 128 Axel's insufficient funding. Note: 1 eris equals 1 yen. As evening fell, the afterglow of the setting sun bathed the spire of Demon King's castle in a warm golden-red hue, but in a secluded little study inside the castle, the atmosphere was completely out of place with this warmth, even somewhat somber. The study was small and simply furnished, with a heavy solid wood desk, a few chairs, and several oak bookshelves crammed with ledgers and documents against the wall. At this moment, 3 people were sitting around the desk, each with a more serious expression than the last. Chris sat upright in the main seat, his purple eyes focused intently on a thick, worn leather ledger laid out before him, his delicate brows slightly furrowed. She was dressed in a dark purple casual outfit that allowed her to move around easily, but it still couldn't hide the calm and intellectual quality that belonged to the goddess of fortune. Darkness sat to her left, dressed in light casual armor, her long golden hair tied in a neat ponytail. Her azure eyes were also fixed on the numbers in the ledger, her lips were pressed into a straight line, and her fingers unconsciously tapped the table, making a rhythmic soft sound that revealed her inner anxiety. Was huddled in the chair to Chris's right, almost burying himself in the oversized black assistant's robe. He clutched the leather folder he never parted with tightly in his arms, his deep purple eyes darting around, not daring to look directly at the ledger, much less at Chris and Darkness. His face was paler than usual, and fine beads of cold sweat even seeped from his forehead. The air was filled with a mixture of old paper, ink, and a faint sense of despair. After a long while, Chris gently closed the ledger and let out a barely audible sigh. She looked up at Darkness and Wiz, her purple eyes filled with a hint of helplessness and seriousness. "The situation is worse than we thought." Chris's voice was still gentle, but the heaviness in it made Darkness stop tapping her fingers, and was curled up even tighter. "Wiz," Chris turned to the lich assistant, his voice not blaming, but calmly stating the facts. "You previously emptied the National Treasury reserves due to certain special expenses. Although Assistant Kun later brought back a large sum of money from Erlode, and with the taxes and income from this period, it seems quite well off. We have just carefully calculated the costs of the castle's daily maintenance, Crimson Demon Clan research funding, Adventurers Guild subsidies, Academy education grants, new immigrant resettlement, and all sorts of endless additional applications from Aqua." She paused, then tapped the cover of the ledger with her fingertip. "Currently, the available balance in the National Treasury is only about 50 million eris." 50 million, Darkness gasped, his azure eyes filled with shock. How could there be so little left? "When I looked at the monthly report last time, there were still hundreds of millions left." "That's last month's report, Darkness," Chris explained patiently. "This month alone, the routine energy replenishment and maintenance of some worn parts of Caucasus Scarab Castle cost nearly 50 million. The Crimson Demon Clan has applied for new funding of 50 million for advanced magic expansion research and ancient dragon ruins exploration. And Aqua, under the pretext of appeasing believers and repairing churches, has taken away nearly 20 million. With each number she announced, Darkness's expression darkened, and Wiz lowered his head an inch. And Chris continued, his tone becoming more serious. "The most fatal problem is that we currently do not have any standardized and sustainable fiscal revenue system. The taxes that Kazuma set arbitrarily before are chaotic in name and inconsistent in standards, making them difficult to collect. Moreover, he himself is inconsistent in his efforts and doesn't care at all. Most of the revenue still comes from the Adventurers Guild's share of the missions they complete, the rent from shops in the city, and the occasional windfall. This fiscal situation is like a castle built on sand which may collapse at any time." She looked at the two of them. 50 million eris, that sounds like a lot. But given Axel's current scale and various expenses, it can only last for 2 months at most. If something unexpected happens in between, like Megumin blowing up again and requiring compensation, or Aqua coming up with some new idea, the consequences would be unimaginable. The city's operations have come to a standstill, various plans have been shelved, and it may even trigger internal unrest. Darkness clenched his fist, a resolute glint in his azure eyes. "This can't go on. We must immediately reform the finances. Establish a standardized tax system. Increase revenue and reduce expenditure." Chris nodded approvingly, that's exactly why I called you here. The three of us are currently the most knowledgeable and responsible in the castle's administration. We can't count on him. Aqua will only cause trouble. Megumin and Alice are too young, and not good at this. Yu is too shy. Let's not even talk about him. So this matter can only be handled by us. I understand, Chris. Darkness nodded solemnly. What do you need me to do? Strengthen the collection of existing taxes. Or revise the tax rates. No, Darkness, the current system is too chaotic and unfair, and there will be a lot of resistance. Chris shook his head, a glint of wisdom flashing in his purple eyes. We need a relatively fair, easy-to-implement plan that can quickly replenish the national treasury. I remember that in Belzard, there was a capital income tax for the wealthy, which worked quite well. Asset gains tax. Darkness thought for a moment. You mean, a proportional tax on the annual increase in an individual's or family's assets? Yes. Chris took a blank parchment from the drawer and began to write quickly with a quill pen. We can take this into consideration, but we need to simplify it based on Axel's actual situation. My initial idea is to set an asset threshold, for example, 10 million heiress. As long as the total assets under an individual's or family's name exceed this threshold, a certain percentage of special contribution tax will be levied to supplement urban development and public expenditures. She looked up at the two of them. Regarding the tax rate, it shouldn't be too high to avoid a backlash, but it also needs to solve the problem. I suggest 50%. That is, for assets exceeding 10 million, half of their value should be taxed this year. Half. Darkness was somewhat surprised. Isn't this tax rate a bit too high? Those wealthy businessmen and powerful adventurers might be unhappy about it. Precisely because they are wealthy, they should contribute their efforts when the city is in trouble. Chris calmly stated, moreover, this only applies to the excess portion, not all assets. For truly large asset holders, while it may hurt, it's not unbearable. More importantly, this tax system is simple and clear, with well-defined thresholds, making collection relatively easy, and allowing us to quickly raise a large sum of money to alleviate our immediate crisis. She paused, then added, of course, we can set up some tax relief provisions, such as allowing partial tax deductions for investments made within the city, hiring local residents, or donating to public welfare projects to encourage them to use the money for urban development. Darkness pondered for a moment, then nodded, that makes sense. But how exactly will it be implemented? Who will assess the assets? And how will taxes be levied? An assessment can be conducted by forming a temporary asset verification team, consisting of you, me, Wiz, and a few reliable representatives from the Crimson Demon clan and adventurers to develop simple assessment criteria. Chris planned for Dao. Taxation will be handled directly by the castle, with a dedicated tax payment window and deadlines. Most importantly, her gaze sharpened as she looked at Darkness and Wiz, lowering her voice. This matter must be kept secret, especially from Kazuma, Koen, and Aqua. At least not until it is officially announced and implemented. Darkness was taken aback. Why? Kazuma, If Kazuma finds out about Dao, given his personality, he will likely find it troublesome, or out of some strange sense of righteousness, he will oppose or even stop it. Chris analyzed Dao. Moreover, if he knew that Dao would have to pay so much tax, given his money-loving and lazy nature, he might have transferred or hidden assets in advance, or even tried to find loopholes. Needless to say, Aqua would be even worse. If she knew that Dao's personal savings and bubble wine fund were going to be cut in half, she would cause a huge uproar, and then we wouldn't be able to do anything. She looked at the two of them, her words leaving no room for doubt. Therefore, we must, as quickly as possible, draft a detailed plan and announcement tomorrow, then suddenly release it and begin implementation immediately. Catch them off guard. Once the deed is done and the taxes start flowing into the treasury, it will be too late for them to make a fuss. Darkness suddenly understood and nodded vigorously. I get it. Chris, you're right. This matter must be dealt with swiftly. Wiz, who had been silent all along, finally raised her head weakly and whispered, "But Lord Chris, Lord Darkness. Lord Kazuma, his assets are probably, well, far more than 10 million, right? And Lord Aqua, although she spends money recklessly, she probably saved quite a bit from selling snacks at the festival and from the offerings from the believers. If we go by this tax rate, they'll have to pay a huge sum." He recalled what he had secretly seen before, the small box under Kazuma's bed stuffed with all sorts of gold notes, jewels, and strange cards, the bulging embroidered money pouch inside Aqua's pillow, and her off-bragged goddess's little treasury. If this were really taxed at half the value of assets, Wiz couldn't help but shiver. He could already foresee the horrific scene that would unfold when the announcement came out tomorrow, and those two learned of their massive bleeding. Chris gave a rare, slightly sly and helpless smile. "There's nothing we can do about it. As the city's managers and goddesses, they should set an example and contribute their efforts to the city. Besides," a calculating glint flashed in her eyes, "most of Assistant Kun's money is ill-gotten gains, and Aqua's money also comes from many illegitimate sources. Taking from the people and using it for the people is perfectly reasonable, isn't it?" Darkness couldn't help but smile slightly, but quickly regained his seriousness. "That's true, but tomorrow probably won't be peaceful." "I know, Dao." Chris stood up, carefully putting away the parchment scroll filled with preliminary plans, his gaze resolute. "But for Axel's future, we must do this. Darkness, you're in charge of contacting reliable people, preparing the evaluation team list and simple verification criteria. Wiz, you organize the existing population and asset registration data. We'll carefully review it again tonight and refine the plan. We'll announce it first thing tomorrow morning." "Yes." Darkness also stood up, straightening his back, as if he were about to carry out an important military mission. "Yes, yes." Wiz also stood up quickly. Although his voice trembled, he knew that Dao's matter was of great importance. The three discussed some details in hushed tones before dispersing to begin making secret preparations for tomorrow's fiscal reform. The sun sank completely below the horizon, and night enveloped the castle. Unbeknownst to anyone, on this seemingly peaceful night, a tax storm targeting the city's rich was quietly brewing. Meanwhile, Kazuma, completely unaware of the impending doom, was lying on her large bed in her room, happily counting the Gatchan mass production model she had just received from the system as a reward for the successful festival. Aqua, meanwhile, was soaking in the castle's large bathtub, humming off-key songs, while fantasizing about using the money in her secret stash to buy all the limited edition bubble wines, piling them up into a small mountain, and then swimming in them. They had no idea that tomorrow morning, instead of a delicious breakfast and a leisurely sleep, they would be greeted by a cold tax order and the imminent loss of most of their private property. It's late at night. The castle lights gradually went out. Only in that small study did the light stay on until very late. Chris, Darkness, and Wiz were working furiously at their desks, checking data, and making final preparations for tomorrow's battle. The moonlight outside the window shone coldly on the castle's towering spires. It's as if it's foreshadowing that tomorrow will be a day of chaos and wailing for Axel. Chapter 129 Forced Expropriation. The afternoon sun lazily shone into the living room of Caucasus Scarab Castle, where a scene of fierce battle between Cayman Rider Zio and the alien dragon Rider was playing on a huge magical projection screen. The lights and shadows flickered, and the sound effects were exhilarating. On the sofa in the living room, people are in various poses. Megumin's ruby-red eyes were glued to the screen, occasionally mimicking the transformation sound effects from the show, Rider Time. Cayman Rider Zio. Although she is more obsessed with explosion magic, this kind of transformation and cool battles unexpectedly fit her aesthetic. Sylphina sat obediently next to Megumin, her bright blue eyes curiously watching the dazzling battles and transformations on the screen. Occasionally, she would whisper to Megumin, "Megumin, what's that black and gold watch face?" She always paid special attention to anything related to her brother's power. Claire sat upright on the single sofa to the side and behind Alice, like a silent guardian statue. Aqua sprawled unceremoniously on the largest sofa, clutching a large bucket of buttered popcorn, stuffing it into her mouth while mumbling, "Ha. That's impressive. But it's still far inferior to my goddess's dazzling skills. Ugh, this weirdo is really ugly." Wolbach, in his elegant Komasuk form, perched on the armrest of the sofa, his golden-red cat eyes half closed, as if dozing off, or perhaps observing everyone's reactions with great interest. The pink paw pads would occasionally step on things unconsciously. The atmosphere was relaxed, even a little too comfortable. Just then, wah, wah. A sharp, urgent, and highly penetrating magical alarm suddenly came from outside the castle, towards the city's central square. This sound is unlike any ordinary bell or horn. It is the Adventurers Guild's most advanced emergency call to arms. It is only used when a major crisis occurs and the entire city's resources need to be mobilized. The peaceful atmosphere in the living room was instantly shattered. What was that sound? An emergency mobilization order. What happened? The Demon King's army has attacked. Everyone stood up abruptly, even Wolbach's cat-like eyes widened and his ears perked up. Almost at the same time the alarm sounded, the sound was heard throughout the castle, throughout the city, by all members of the Adventurers Guild, or by registered adventurers, including many citizens. All personnel. Proceed to the central square immediately. Repeat, proceed to the central square immediately. It's an emergency call-up. Megumin reacted the fastest, grabbing a staff member leaning against the sofa, his little face showing excitement and vigilance. Let's go. Let's go check it out. Could it be that some powerful monster has appeared? Alice nervously grabbed Claire's sleeve. Claire's expression was also grave, but her instinct to protect the princess made her immediately decide, "Alice. Your Highness, the situation is unclear, we'd better. Something big must have happened. Maybe an ancient treasure trove has been discovered. Or maybe a super rare monster has appeared. The reward must be huge." Aqua's eyes lit up, and she threw down the popcorn bucket and jumped up. "Let's go. Let's go see. If we're late, the bonus will be stolen by someone else." Wolbach lightly leaped off the railing, transforming back into human form. His long pink hair fluttered, and his face wore his usual enigmatic smile. Interesting. Such a grand commotion. I might as well go and take a look. So the group hurriedly left the castle, and ran towards the central square with the crowds that were also pouring out from all directions. When they arrived, the square was already packed with people. The adventurers were fully armed and looked serious, the citizens whispered among themselves, their faces showing unease, while the Crimson Demon clan looked around excitedly, guessing what big event was happening. However, when everyone arrived and their eyes were focused on the temporary platform erected in the center of the square, they were surprised to find that the person standing on it was neither the guild leader, who was expected to issue the raid mission, nor the patrol captain who was reporting the enemy situation. Instead, it was Chris, Darkness, and Wiz, who was clutching a folder, pale-faced, and trying to shrink behind the two of them. Behind the three stood dozens of people with serious expressions, dressed in uniform, who looked like a mix of guards and clerks. They subtly cordoned off the platform and several main exits of the square. "Wiz?" Aqua's eyes widened. "It's you guys. You issued the emergency call to arms. What's going on? I thought there was a reward or a monster." Kazuma squeezed to the front of the crowd, looking at the three people on the stage, especially Chris's serious expression and Darkness's tightly pursed lips. For no reason, her heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling. "Dear residents of Axel, adventurers." Chris stepped forward, picked up a megaphone magic stone, and said in her usual gentle but now powerful voice, "Thank you all for responding to the call, and coming so quickly. This call is not due to external invasion or internal disaster, but to announce an important decision concerning the future survival and development of the city." She surveyed the dense crowd of bewildered faces below, took a deep breath, and declared clearly and firmly. "After careful assessment, Axel's current financial situation has reached a critical juncture. The treasury is empty and unsustainable. In order to ensure the normal operation of the city, the development of public services, and the long-term development of the future, it has been decided that, effective immediately, a special asset contribution tax will be officially implemented in Axel. Taxation. Taxation. Oh, that. A murmur of discussion arose below, but most reactions were lukewarm. Taxation is common in every country and city. While it was a bit sudden, it was understandable. As long as it wasn't too harsh. However, Chris's next words caused everyone's expressions to freeze instantly. The specific details are as follows: effective immediately, the total assets of individuals and families registered in Axel, or whose main economic activities are in the city, will be assessed. Those whose assets exceed 10 million eris will be required to pay 50% of the annual asset gain, as a special contribution tax to the national treasury on the excess portion. Quiet. A deathly silence enveloped the entire square. 10 million. Half of the amount exceeding that. The next second. Whoosh. Like cold water being poured into a boiling oil pan, the entire square instantly exploded. 10 million. Half of the amount exceeding that. Are you kidding me? I just got into the Erlode casino this year, and now I have to pay 5 million. This is robbery. This is even more ruthless than the Demon King's army. All my assets total only a little over 8 million, thank goodness. I still have a batch of magical materials in my warehouse that I haven't sold yet. Run. Don't let them register. Yes. Let's run away first. Get out of Axel. Where do you want to run? There's a sky wall. Climb over the wall. Dive into the water. There's always a way. The crowd instantly descended into extreme panic and chaos. The reaction was particularly strong among adventurers who were wealthy and had made a lot of money this year. They earned their money by risking their lives, so who would willingly hand over half of it for no reason? Instantly, the crowd surged forward like a swarm of wasps, rushing recklessly toward the outer edge of the square. Pushing, shoving, shouting, and some even started using speed magic or fighting to force a breakthrough. Everyone calm down. Listen to us. Darkness stepped forward, trying to maintain order with her knightly authority, but her voice was so weak amidst the great noise and chaos. The small number of people she and Chris brought were no match for the frantically fleeing crowd, and were quickly scattered and broken. And at the heart of the riots, the two most dazzling stars are undoubtedly Kazuma. Run. Aqua let out a shrill scream, as if its tail had been stepped on. It grabbed the still-dazed Kazuma, and burst into incredible speed, dragging him like two whirlwinds towards the sparsest corner of the crowd. Aqua even used its speed blessing. Aqua. Kazuma finally realized what was happening, let out a scream, and ran faster than Aqua without her help. His mind raced, calculating the billions he'd amassed from Erode, casinos, system rewards, and various windfalls. Half of that. Absolutely. Hand it over. Stop them. Stop Kazuma and Aqua first. Chris shouted anxiously from the stage. She knew that as long as she targeted these two big spenders and typical examples, she could make an example of them and quickly collect a large sum of tax revenue. Darkness immediately locked onto the target, unleashing his full fighting spirit like a golden arrow, chasing after the two fleeing figures. Wiz gritted his teeth, and cast a clumsy slow spell in an attempt to disrupt the flow. But Kazuma was not one to sit idly by and wait for his doom. Seeing that Darkness was getting closer and closer, Chris also commanded several skilled guards to surround them. He gritted his teeth, and no longer cared about hiding. You forced me to do this. Kazuma shouted as he ran, swiping his hand across the void realm. One Dao's silvery gray light emerged out of thin air from around him. The light landed and instantly condensed into silent and majestic warriors wearing black, gold, and blue armor and wielding long-handled halberds, the mass-produced Kato. 300 katas appeared out of nowhere, like a steel torrent, instantly filling the street, and completely blocking the pursuing Darkness, Chris, guards, and many fleeing adventurers. What is this? A demon, a golem, or a construct. There are so many. We can't get through it all. Kazuma. You bastard. You've been hiding so many trump cards. Darkness swung his sword and felled Tukatas, blocking his way, but faced with an ironclad defense line composed of 300 tireless and formidable underlings, he found it difficult to break through for the time being. Note: Darkness was hit because the people were standing too close together, and actually hit the two next to the original target. Chris was also blocked by the Katas. Although she was able to get away with it through luck and skill, it was impossible for her to catch up with Kazuma and the other two. Goodbye everyone. I'll think about taxes later. Kazuma turned around and made a face, then grabbed Aqua, who was still shocked by the sudden appearance of her little brother, and plunged into the intricate alleyways next door. After a few turns, they disappeared into the shadows of the buildings. Having temporarily shaken off their pursuers, the two stopped deep in a secluded, deserted alley, leaning against the cold wall, panting heavily. Ha ha, you scared me to death. Aqua patted her flat chest, still shaken. I almost lost half my savings. Chris and Darkness went too far. They actually launched a sneak attack behind our backs. Exactly. Kazuma exclaimed indignantly, counting the enormous sum of money she was about to lose, her heart aching with pain. Over $1 billion. Half of it. As he was complaining, his gaze inadvertently swept across one side of the alley. There were piles of abandoned building materials and miscellaneous items, including an inconspicuous large glass window covered with thick dust, which appeared to be a discarded shop window or a part of an instrument. The glass surface was dirty, but it seemed to faintly reflect the distorted light coming in from the alleyway. Aqua's goddess intuition suddenly stirred. She sensed that the glass seemed a little unusual. There seemed to be some kind of faint, strange energy fluctuation inside. Kazuma, look at that. She pointed to the glass and walked over curiously. It's just a piece of broken glass. Kazuma was still upset about the money and didn't say anything nice. Aqua had already walked to the glass and stretched out her small hand, which was a little dirty from running away, curiously and tentatively touching the cold, dusty glass surface. The instant her fingertips touched the glass. Buzz. Suddenly an incredibly intense and dazzling pure white light burst forth from inside the glass. In an instant, the entire dark alley was illuminated as if it were daytime. An incredibly powerful suction force emanated from the glass. Whoa! What the hell? Kazuma and Aqua only had time to let out a short scream before they were completely engulfed by the white light. The two figures vanished into the alleyway in an instant, as if erased by an eraser. The white light came quickly and went quickly. A second later, the light faded, and the alley returned to darkness. The dusty glass still stood there quietly, as if nothing had ever happened. Only a few messy footprints remained on the ground, indicating that there were indeed two people here just now. The edge of the roof of a building above the alley. Huang stood there quietly, his yellow robe and scarf fluttering gently in the breeze. His handsome face held a complex expression, a mixture of apology, determination, and anticipation. He looked down at the empty alley below and the seemingly ordinary glass, and murmured to himself, his voice as soft as a sigh. I'm sorry, Lady Aqua, Lady Kazuma. For the inevitability of history, and for the true awakening of darkness's power. Thank you both for your hard work. I'll be disappearing for a while now. However, at least, for the time being, the two gentlemen don't have to worry about those troublesome taxes. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze seemingly piercing through the sky above the city, looking towards some unknown future, a mysterious smile curving his lips. The stage is now being handed over to another protagonist. With a flicker of his figure, Huang vanished silently from the rooftop like a phantom. The alleyway returned to silence. Only from the direction of the distant square could one faintly hear the clamor and chaos of the pursuit of tax evaders. Axel's tax storm has only just begun. However, the two biggest tax evaders have mysteriously disappeared into a pane of glass. Chapter 130: The Fallen Mirror World. The bright light faded and the dizzying sensation disappeared. Kazuma and Aqua find themselves standing in a very, very familiar place. This is the living room of the old house that served as the base of the Sato Kazuma squad when they were in Axel City. Ha! Aqua was the first to exclaim, her blue eyes widening as she looked around incredulously. Where is this? Our house in Axel. How did we end up back in Axel? Wait a minute. Where's Axel? What was that glass thing just now? Kazuma was also stunned. He rubbed his eyes hard and then pinched his thigh. Pain is not a dream. He looked around warily, and yes, it was indeed Axel's old house. What's going on? Instant teleportation. Spatial teleportation. Or is that glass a teleportation magic circle? Kazuma's mind raced as he tried to understand the situation. Could Dao be a trap set by Chris or Wiz to drag them back to pay taxes? No, that glass and the sudden suction feel completely different. Just as the two were filled with surprise and doubt. Oh my, Assistant Kun, you're back. Why are you here so early today? A gentle, familiar female voice, but with a tone more composed, intellectual, and even slightly alluring than I remembered, came from the kitchen doorway. Kazuma and Aqua turned their heads sharply. Chris, wearing a simple plaid apron and carrying a steaming hot pot of soup, walked out of the kitchen. Her attire was similar to usual, but her temperament was completely different. His long, silver hair cascaded smoothly over his shoulders, and a faint smile, tinged with doting affection and a hint of playfulness, played on his lips. When his amethyst-like eyes looked over, they no longer conveyed the feeling of a reliable senior, but rather the feeling of looking at a younger brother who needed care. Or someone even closer. Most importantly, the way she looked at Kazuma was so tender it could melt your heart. It was an undisguised, possessive tenderness. Aqua was dumbfounded. This Chris seemed really strange. She's still so beautiful, but what's with that gentle yet slightly cunning and proactive feeling? Although the original Chris would occasionally tease people, she was generally a reliable and calm older sister. Boss? Kazuma blurted out. Chris placed the soup pot on the dining table in the living room, then walked over naturally, extending his clean, oil-free hand to gently smooth Kazuma's slightly disheveled collar, his movements practiced and affectionate. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. And Aqua, why is she so quiet today? Usually, she's always saying she's hungry as soon as she gets back. As she spoke, her gaze swept over Aqua, and she raised an eyebrow slightly. And why are you covered in dust? Where have you been fooling around again? Didn't I tell you to be mindful of your manners? Go wash your hands and get ready for dinner. I made your favorite stew today, Assistant Kun. Kazuma got goosebumps all over. This Chris, something's really off. She's way too close. And that look in her eyes, he's only ever seen that in certain inappropriate game cutscenes. Just then, footsteps came from the stairs. It's so noisy. What are you yelling about down there? Can't a person read a book in the street? An impatient, irritable female voice rang out. Wiz, dressed in a neat black outfit, with her long, dark brown hair tied in a high ponytail, walked downstairs with an unhappy expression. Her eyes were no longer timid and evasive, instead, they held a sharp and agitated look, as if they were about to explode. But when she saw Kazuma, her irritable expression softened slightly, though her tone was still sharp. Oh, it's you. Be quiet now that you're back. And don't leave your dirty clothes lying around next time. I just cleaned them up yesterday. Wiz? Aqua was shocked again. This Wiz is so fierce. And he actually scolded Kazuma. Wasn't the original Wiz both respectful and afraid of Kazuma, and always spoke softly to her? Humph. Wiz snorted, but when her gaze swept across Kazuma's face, a hint of concern flashed across her face. She then turned her head away, her ears seemingly turning slightly red. Go wash your hands and eat. Chris has been busy all afternoon preparing this meal. Wiz is still so dishonest. Chris chuckled, covering his mouth, his eyes darting between Wiz and Kazuma with a meaningful look. Who's not being honest? Wiz blushed and glared at Chris, but it had no effect. Kazuma was completely petrified. Wiz told him to be quiet. And with a hint of coquettishness. What's wrong with this world? Oh, everyone's here. Another voice joined in, it was Megumin. She emerged from her room on the second floor, dressed in an elegant light blue dress. Her ruby-like eyes were calm and peaceful, and she held a thick, seemingly profound book on magical theory in her hands. She moved with light steps and elegant posture, completely lacking her usual over-the-top, eccentric excitement. Instead, she possessed a quiet, intellectual quality, and even a bit aloofness. Megumin, any progress in today's research? Chris asked gently. Well, I have some guesses about, but they still need to be verified. Megumin's voice was calm and even. She glanced at Kazuma and Aqua, nodded slightly as a greeting, then went straight to the dining table, pulled out a chair, sat down, and continued reading her book, seemingly oblivious to the noise around her. Megumin. Aqua's jaw nearly dropped to the floor. Who is this quiet, elegant, studious, and noisy lady? She's the one who always shouts explosion magic, strikes strange poses, and acts all loud and boisterous like Crimson Demon Clan. Give genius back. Kazuma began to suspect that he might be under some kind of powerful illusion magic. Immediately afterwards, the door was pushed open with a bang. I'm back. I took on 3 raid quests at the guild today, and completed them all. The rewards are super rich. Ha ha ha. A carefree, boisterous voice, typical of Origin Chi, rang out. She charged in, carrying a 2-handed greatsword almost as tall as herself, her clothes stained with monster blood. As soon as she entered, she slammed her greatsword against the wall with a clang, completely unconcerned about damaging the floor. Then she ripped off her sweat-soaked headscarf, revealing a head of smooth, short blue hair and a bright, cheerful, confident smile that seemed oblivious to the opinions of others. How many times have I told you not to leave weapons by the door? Also, go take a shower first. You smell of sweat and blood. Wiz immediately frowned and scolded. I know. Wiz, you're so long-winded. Yu waved her hand dismissively, then her gaze fell on Kazuma. Her eyes lit up and she rushed over, giving Kazuma's shoulder a hard pat. You're back. How was your day? Anything interesting happened? Want to grab a drink tonight? I know Dao opened a new bar, their bubble wine is amazing. Yo. Aqua was so shocked she was numb. Is this tomboy who carries a greatsword, has a forthright personality, and always takes the initiative to invite people for drinks really the same Yu who blushes when she speaks and suffers from severe social anxiety? And how did she go from being a mage to a swordsman all of a sudden? Darkness and Alice, your highness, will be back soon too. Chris smiled, seemingly accustomed to the chaos before him, and said, it seems there's some kind of meeting at the palace today. Lord Darkness has been invited to give a speech. Alice, your highness, appears to be attending on behalf of the royal family as well. No sooner had he finished speaking than there was another noise at the door. Darkness and Alice walked in side by side. Darkness was dressed in a sharp, dark blue knight's uniform, his blonde hair neatly tied back, his bright blue eyes sharp and piercing, his posture upright, exuding an aura of integrity, authority, and leadership qualities. She frowned slightly, as if she was thinking about some serious issue. When she saw the people in the room, she simply nodded slightly. When her gaze swept over Kazuma, she paused for a moment before looking away. A hint of disdain and some kind of condescending scrutiny seemed to flash in her eyes. Darkness, Alice, you're back. How did the meeting go? Chris asked. Well, it went fairly smoothly. But those nobles' clichés were so boring they made me sleepy. Darkness's voice was calm and magnetic. She walked into the living room, took off her white gloves with elegant movements, and said, "Alice, on the other hand. Your Highness's remarks today were quite insightful." "That's natural." Alice raised her delicate chin, her azure eyes filled with arrogance and confidence. Dressed in a gorgeous princess dress, she stood proudly, like a haughty white swan. How could those mediocre people compare to my insights? Her gaze swept over the crowd, pausing briefly when it landed on Kazuma. A complex emotion flickered in her eyes, a mixture of infatuation, possessiveness, but mostly the haughtiness of a princess and an expression that said, "You should be grateful." "Kazuma, you're back. You didn't go out and cause any trouble for this princess today, did you?" "Kazuma." He was no longer able to speak. Who is this arrogant and conceited little princess? What about his well-behaved, adorable, and occasionally affectionate younger sister, Alice? And who is this upright and serious darkness who looks at him like trash? Where is that weird knight with his strange fetishes and tendency to get shy? "Hey, you guys." Aqua finally regained some of her voice from the shock, and she pointed at the group of familiar yet unfamiliar companions in front of her, stammering as she asked, "What's wrong with you all? Did you take the wrong medicine? Or are you all under some strange spell? And where are we? Shouldn't we be in Axel? Chris, weren't you doing some kind of tax collection nonsense? Darkness, why are you dressed like that? Megumin, where's your explosion magic? Yo-Yo, why are you using your full power? Wiz, why are you so fierce? Alice, you. Aqua, you're talking a lot today, which is strange." Darkness interrupted Aqua's incoherent questioning. She walked to the head of the table and sat down gracefully, her azure eyes looking at Aqua with a hint of displeasure. "Also, watch your words and your treatment of Alice. Your Highness's attitude. Also, regarding Axel and taxation, what kind of place is that? And what kind of trivial matter is that? That is." Wiz crossed his arms and said impatiently, "Aqua, aren't you usually the most composed one? Why are you being so loud and talking nonsense today?" Steadfast. Aqua was struck dumb. And Chris walked to Kazuma's side, naturally took his arm, leaned slightly closer, and with a gentle yet slightly teasing smile on his face, said in a soft but loud voice, not too loud, but loud enough for everyone to hear, towards Kazuma, who was completely petrified and whose expression seemed to have collapsed. "Assistant Kun is the pillar of all of us. He's upright, brave, and strong. Although he can be a little clumsy with his lust sometimes, he's married us all and built a harem. As the first person to be with him, Aqua, why are you acting like you've lost your memory today? Were you too tired last night? A harem. The first person he was with." Aqua's expression shifted instantly from shock to bewilderment, and then, her pupils dilated in shock. "A harem. To have a harem. To marry you all. I'm the first one." Aqua's voice suddenly rose, filled with disbelief, and a sense of absurdity that she herself didn't realize. What the hell? This NEET scum pervert Kazuma who's good for nothing but stealing and being lewd. He has a harem. And I'm the first. That's absolutely impossible. Even if I, Aqua-sama, starve to death. Jump off the castle. I would never have any relationship with this NEET that goes beyond pure camaraderie. Let alone. She excitedly pointed at Kazuma, then at her group of personality-bending companions, and she was so flustered that she could barely speak. After the initial shock and absurdity, a lightning-fast thought suddenly struck Kazuma's mind. Opposite personalities. A familiar yet strange place. Completely reversed interpersonal relationships. This is it. Mirror, mirror world. Kazuma exclaimed, her green eyes filled with horror. Could it be that the glass they just touched wasn't a teleportation array, but an entrance to a mirror world? And this world is based on their original world, but everything is a reverse projection. Therefore, the originally reliable and calm Chris has become a gentle, cunning, and proactive big sister. The originally timid and docile Wiz has become an irritable, easily angered, but arrogant housekeeper. The once energetic and immature Megumin has transformed into a quiet and intellectual bookworm. Originally shy and socially awkward, Yu has transformed into a bold and confident tomboy. Darkness, who originally had masochistic tendencies, has transformed into an upright and serious, strong woman. The once well-behaved and adorable Alice has turned into an arrogant and conceited little princess. And Aqua, who was originally the most unreliable and whom he regarded as an idiot goddess, is actually mature and steady, hates bubble wine, and is also his first woman in the harem. As for himself, an upright, brave, powerful, harem-owning male protagonist. Pfft. Thinking of this setting, Kazuma almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of hellish joke is this? A mirror world, huh? Opposite personalities, huh? He looked at Chris, who was clinging to his arm with a tender expression, then at Darkness, who was giving him a cold shoulder, then at Alice, who was holding her head high with pride, and then at Aqua, who was still confused and questioning her existence because of the harem theory. Kazuma felt a sudden dizziness, even more so than when he was sucked into the glass. P.S. Regarding why Aqua was set up this way in the original mirror world, it's because the mirror world is the opposite. In the original world, Kazuma, who sees Aqua as a blue-haired monkey, has absolutely no feelings for her. But in this opposite world, I think it goes without saying. And it seems to be more fun this way. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.